Hi, I'm Linda from Ecom Ideas. I hunt and share what's cool and trending in e-commerce and post it on LinkedIn every day. But what's cool on the front end can have hidden impact on your web performance, which impacts your SEO and conversion rates. So I tapped the expertise of Shawn from SpeedSense, and we looked under the hood of some of your favorite ecom ideas to get tips and insights on how to implement them in a more performant way. That's the subject of this webinar. Hope you enjoy. So this is another trending experience, the 360-degree auto rotation landing video. And of course, everybody understands that this may be a risky move if it's not done well. So can you walk us through this implementation and what could be optimized here?
Sure. I like how it looks. I get the value from the brand perspective. The next thing that could be optimized for this page is the order in which they're loading this asset. So you can see actually on this waterfall, the video file is requested quite late. So I think it's 100 and something asset, 106. Yeah, here you go. This is 106. This is the video. So 105 other files were loaded before that was loaded. And that's the most relevant content on this screen. So the recommendation would be basically preload this, give some indication to the browser early in the page load lifecycle that go get this video. We're going to need this video. Right now it's, well, we can see in here, we're waiting, this guy. We can see in here, we're waiting 4 seconds before it's discovered at all. And then we start loading it at 5 seconds, and then it takes 2.5 seconds to download, basically. So that's whatever, 7 seconds before this video is complete, when it could have been loaded as one of the top 2 or 3 files here by preloading the asset in the head with a preload tag and setting fetch priority to high, as opposed to letting the browser discover it in time. So that would have the effect then basically of having your video here much sooner. And your video is the most relevant content.
And you can load a static image first.
You could do that, yeah. There's also a video tag has an attribute called a poster. So you could load just that. And you'd want to preload that asset as well. So that as the video is loading in the background, you can get the product in front of the user basically immediately. I'd recommend that the poster attribute be the first frame of the video so that it transitions seamlessly into playing.
So this is an example. I just want to shout out Antonio Schmitter for posting this on LinkedIn. That's how I discovered it. But he did comment that this is quite the laggy experience. So I wanted to ask Shawn, what the diagnostics here, what's causing this to load slow, and what could be improved?
Yeah, great. There could be a lot of reasons for this. But essentially the problem is search. I mean, it doesn't look like search, but if you're a vendor or shopping for product listing, product discovery, you've inevitably seen that search and explore are powered by the same services most of the time. So yeah, this could be a long front end delay. It could be a ton of JavaScript running. We're going to look under the hood quickly. And we saw a minute ago that when I click a filter here, it makes a request immediately. This request is just waiting. I mean, I've got a pretty fast network, but even if I made this, I'm going to not throttle this and we'll just use my cable line and do that again. Apply a filter. This is not my computer's waiting. It's not doing anything right now. The CPU is quiet. It's all this long backend call. So waiting for server response for 5 seconds. Every time I click a color here, it makes a new request to the server to get presumably the results of that filter. It takes 5 seconds on the server to perform that query and then returns the results. That 5 seconds is obviously the problem. And this isn't a huge amount of content. So there are ways in which, well, we can show other examples where filtering by color could be done in much more performant. Should we do that?
Let's go.
So IKEA does a decent job. Imagine these were exposed. This is definitely done via Ajax or like asynchronous, an API call. So there's client-side code that makes the request to get the the payload for the new filter set, and let's see how long that takes, for instance. So we can see for IKEA, this search result returned in, where's our timing? 74 milliseconds. So there's a finite set of results that could be returned. The thing that this site is not doing, which IKEA probably is caching the responses to all those queries. So the browser is making a query and say, give me the results for black and red and no other filter applied. There are a lot of combinations here, of course, of filters that could be added in different permutations, different firmness, different color, etc. The problem's even less so here, though I can't read that word. Let's translate this. Okay, room type. Fair enough. Yeah. So two dimensions, we'll say here. But this can be done very performant. This can be, you want to cache the results of all these queries, so it doesn't take 5 seconds to look it all up in the database every time. That's, I suspect, is going right to a database to make this call. Taking this all the way to the extreme, Sophology, a few folks who follow Linda have probably seen this. This thing is crazy fast. I'll just zoom out a bit so we can see the couches at the same time. But their color picker, I love the size one. You can adjust. I want it to be this big or that big, and then I can change the color to, this is just ridiculously fast and really fun to play with, and a much bigger data size or sample size. So they've got, a lot of products. So it can be done in a performant way. Here, they might want to just there's nothing dynamic about each of these pages. They're all individually navigable by query parameter. Yeah, you could really just put a CDN in front of this, like Cloudflare or something, and cache the responses for all of these queries. And then it's not going back to the server at all, but use these as page navigations. So there's a few shortcuts you could take. Realistically, Alpina, this paint company, probably isn't a development agency or development shop in-house. And I imagine they're using a third party for this, and there's some optimizations that could be made.
True classic. I love how they are doing some show and tell here, and they're killing off what everybody hates, the rotating carousel, and instead taking a different approach. And what I also love is you can tab through these different contexts, which is definitely trending, being able to preview stuff on different skin tones, body types, all that kind of stuff. So because this is so high up on the fold, it's a video. Is this going to kill performance, or are they safe?
Above the fold video is a hot one. It's possible to do it in a performant way. I'm going to experiment a little with crippling this while we load it. So I'm going to slow down my network connection and refresh this just to see what it looks like on we'll say 4G. So if I was out and about. The first thing that comes in is the video. That was pretty quick. So I'm a fan. Really, whether or not it's a good implementation is going to come down to how quickly can I tell that something is happening, in that the website is loading at all. So first contentful paint, and then I'm in the right place. So the correct, I'm on the right page, the right content is loaded. So the largest contentful paint. In this case, using video as your largest contentful paint can be tricky, and I bet their Core Web Vitals reflect that. But it looks like these are video tags. So not using any overly complex third-party tool, as far as I can tell, built in Shopify. Video-wise, that's probably the tool, and tell you if it's fast. So we can see how it's behaving for real users. This is a problem. Generally, the back end is pretty quick. I mean, 0.8 seconds isn't great, but you could still have a fast experience with a 0.8 second back end time. 2.5 seconds till they render anything. This is mobile we're looking at, and then 3.5 seconds until they render the most important element. So this isn't great. For the whole website, also, I would say they have a performance issue hiding somewhere else because their largest contentful paint is even higher elsewhere. This is comparing the homepage to all the pages on their site. For desktop, for this URL, yeah. So, we can see failing Core Web Vitals. It's tricky to do this in a performant way. The biggest problem here would be this interaction to next paint. So what's happening likely is when someone wants to click on something, like anything, maybe it's click on this product, there's a lot of other stuff going on this page, probably loading 6 different video clips for these side-by-sides, or maybe it's 3. Yeah, it's 3. but yeah, they need to address the fact that, well, it looks like for half of the people, it's taking hundreds of milliseconds. So we'll say half a second on average, probably, between clicking on something and seeing a visual response that this site is actually working. So can quickly give the perception that the site's not actually behaving, and lead to a lot of frustration. I don't know that this video above the fold is to blame for this. It's potentially, but somewhere hiding on their site, they've got some challenges. Yeah, that this homepage is quite bad on mobile.
This picture-in-picture kind of tactic that I've only ever seen on Kizik, which is actually taking the video out of their second position and just popping it over the top. What do you say about a tactic like this?
I'm noticing as I load it on my side, the video is playing before that hero image has come in. So that infers or suggests that the largest contentful element, that big shoe, is less, or is prioritized lower than the looping fit graphic. I like the layout here. I like how they've found space for this graphic, do picture in picture. It's quite cool. I would recommend flipping the priority of those. So prioritize getting your largest element in front of the user immediately. So this big picture of the shoe, and then it'd be relatively innocuous to pop in the video after. I'd want to see a regular straight vanilla video tag used to embed that in there, not like a third-party plugin. But yeah, the challenge right now is that that video is coming in before the shoe arrives. And so, yeah. So if I refresh this, like, it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
It's still not here. There it is. That's like 4 or 5 seconds. This must be a huge asset. Lazy. Oh, there you go. That's the problem. So the fact that this has class lazy on it tells me that they're using some JavaScript to determine which images. Almost certainly here, there's a plugin on their site that says for all IMG tags, add class lazy, so that all images get lazy loaded. The problem is when above the fold images get lazy loaded at the expense of other things that ought to have been deprioritized. So this, if it didn't have lazy on it right here, would be great. Yeah. So that's a big fix there. You can see how slowly that came in. It'd be really quick to do that in a different order. But also let's just check how big that image is, because when it does finally come in, you can see it coming in line by line. I expect it needs to be recompressed because we're on a 4G network. This isn't incredibly slow, but that'll be in here. Let's go to network and press type. Yeah, there you go. That is I think it's at 800K, 863 kilobytes. So that image should be about 10% of that, maybe 20% that size. It's almost a megabyte. So two sort of faux pas in this above the fold experience that you could deliver the exact same experience in a more performant way. Recompress this and take the lazy load tag off.
And it's a PNG, but a PNG can be served as a WebP, it looks like.
They're probably using some edge service. I'm not sure what this accentuate is, but something to change format from PNG to WebP. Some of the problems with compression are if it's uncompressible before it's converted to WebP, you can still have artifacts, or sometimes you'll see like Photoshop color palette information still persisting on a product photo. So export it for web and then run it through your converter. And this should be like 200K max. This doesn't need to be 800K.
So from an operations standpoint, you've got people loading products and they're responsible for product upload and execution here. Is that something that needs to be written into an SOP, or do you think these third-party tools can kind of, overcome any types of things that might fall through the cracks in a product upload or import?
Good question. I think that's a philosophical debate. I believe and I've built our business around implementing best practices and training teams on how to build performant websites by default. There are always like lipstick on a pig type plugins or filters, or I see AI use AI to speed up your website. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That might be the case here. This is coming through as a WebP format, but it's still 800K. So somewhere in that later pipeline, there's an issue which could have been alleviated with process and an SOP, to your point.
So this one is a fave on at least my LinkedIn page. Everybody loved this feature where you can just change the model to swap out the entire gallery. And we're not just seeing this on PDPs, but more and more seeing them at the category level as well. So what is your take on how this impacts performance and how it should be implemented if you're going to try it?
Yeah, I love the idea. I think it's no more or less performant impact or performance impacting than having more images. So if you had 50 more images on this page, there's a way to lazy load those to do it in a performant way. What we really want to make sure is that the fact that there are more images isn't interfering with the initial page load. So let's prioritize the images that will be above the fold and visible over those that will be potentially never seen at all. One thing I'd like to see here is, as I change SKUs, I noticed if I change the model to this model and change the color, it toggles my fit back. I guess it really depends. Maybe they don't have imagery in every model in every color, which would be a big ask. But otherwise, yeah, I think doing this on a PDP versus a category, same principles are going to apply. Let's make sure we're loading the content that's visible to the user. So let's do this in an exacerbated, slowed down way here for a second, pretending we're on 4G. And we'll want to see, well, let's see what comes in first, eh? So my test is going to be, now that the page is loaded, I'm going to clear my network tab and toggle the model to see if new requests are made. And they are, so that's great. They weren't loaded until I needed them, which is exactly what we want to see.
So this is a super innovative feature here from the Lelit site that's using the Tolstoy video app. So it's kind of like an embedded TikTok experience, even how you navigate through the videos. Yeah, so you can see it's this more Gen Z style shopping experience that TikTok Shop is gonna only amplify. So it's very cool to see it embedded on a page, but the question on everyone's mind is, how is this impacting performance?
Yeah, not bad in this case. One of the first tests I'll usually look for something like this is, since this isn't the primary component on the page, is it impacting the performance of the main content? Basically, I would call this secondary content. Is it impacting the primary content? So one way to tell is with a clear cache, we refresh the page with a really choked network and see, did we start seeing this content before the main content, or is it treated as secondary? And so we get the main hero of the PDP showing up, and then the video comes in later. That's great. One thing I would look out for on a page like this is that, let me load this again in a second, and watch this area, and it gets pushed down as this element loads, which will introduce some layout shift. Not a ton in this case, but this add to cart button is going to get pushed below the fold when the content loads. So that's going to increase the CLS score, cumulative layout shift, which is one of the core Web Vitals metrics. But otherwise, in terms of performance, we took a look a minute ago. It doesn't look like it's a heavy payload. Nothing is highly prioritized above other primary content on the page. So I think it's a good implementation. Yeah, I'm not got nothing to say about this, really. It's a good job.
So here, I love this example from Away Travel. What happens after you add something to cart is they're cross-selling it, but they're also showing it in context with an animation. to really sell you on the product. So you don't even have to read the product description. You understand exactly what the value is. And it's an easy one-click to cart. But of course, with anything animated, we have to think about how this impacts performance. So what do you say?
I say this is a cool cross sell because it's an accessory for this suitcase and very like, oh, while you're already buying the base, you may as well buy the bag that goes on top. So yeah, I like the UX a lot. I think it works in a lot of different verticals. I essentially what they're doing here is an animation. So it's multiple frames of pictures that string together in sound like Walt Disney giving animation 101. But this could be better in terms of it looks a bit jank because it's so low frame rate. It's so like laggy. A full video embedded directly in here, just a looping MPEG. Sorry, a full video just directly embedded in here, a looping WebM compressed video file would probably be as performant. I don't know what the format is here. It's probably a GIF. Sorry to object your pronunciation there, but I think I like what they're doing. I like the UX. It could be really quick with a small video clip. And browsers have come a long way over the last decade in that we don't really need GIF on the web anymore. We can use WebM videos, and they're well supported.
We can battle to the death over the GIF pronunciation, because what I heard was the guy that invented the format calls it GIF like the peanut butter, but I'll accept GIF as well.
We're not getting into politics or religion.
We're not getting into crunchy versus smooth here. It's this Aloe in the Wild, which appears to be a third-party app that's pulling in influencer content and then hotspotting it with actual shoppable, where you can start exploring and going through this carousel. So what are your thoughts on it from a performance perspective?
I expect there's a reason it's so low on the page, because it probably requires a fair bit of JavaScript to run. You're going to have to pull in these images from either from the influencer directly, or they're very likely cached in the component. And then the merchandiser likely, or the product itself, the tool itself, would have had to correlate these positions on these images with a given set of product in the catalog. But nothing glaring here. If this was above the fold and we were waiting 30 seconds to see anything show up, then yes, that'd be an issue. So I'm not really familiar with the product, but the implementation looks pretty clean. I would want to check under the hood on the way the page is loading and ensure that this isn't coming in really early, because it seems like everywhere we've seen it, it's well below the fold, as in there are a lot of other content. There's a lot of other content above this. And so when someone lands on this page, I'd want to make sure that they can see that they're on the right page immediately, not at the expense of this shoppable social widget down below. So there's a great opportunity here to get that ready behind the scenes once someone has, shown some intention of scrolling down like you're doing now. Now you can start to get it ready. There's no reason that you'd want to delay your first paint, your largest paint, like some of those core web vitals, by loading this third-party widget that's so low. But otherwise, yeah, no problem with this in particular, short of us investigating it in more detail. I don't know if clicking on this is performant. There's ways to measure the lag between interacting with something and getting a visual response on your screen. It's called this interaction to next paint metric. We'd also want to see how quickly these images are, or how well these images are compressed. So there's for some more detail we can go into. But in general, the way they've implemented it seems responsible.
So this is an interesting PDP. There's a lot of apps that do this kind of hotspot feature, but this appears to be hard-coded. And basically what we're looking at here is hotspots with little value props for different features of a garment from early majority website. So how is this performance-wise?
I like how it's implemented. It seems as though they aren't using any third-party library, and they've just got positions, images, and content embedded right in here. And so I imagine they built this themselves or had an agency build it. But yeah, it's good. We noticed that it doesn't show up on mobile. So that's a bit of a, I don't know, a UX decision, I'm sure. One thing to be wary of is ensuring that the content that loads for it isn't also loaded on mobile so that you're not paying the performance penalty for the majority of your traffic that's not on a desktop device. And you'll notice as we reload quickly, this banner comes in, our cookie warning, and pushes everything down. And so this is again a case of layout shift, and there are other ways to accomplish this. But ideally, you're not moving any elements down. So the worst case scenario is if the person was trying to buy this one, for instance, oh, and then you put me directly on a different SKU right when I clicked, and then I add to cart without having noticed that I'd done that, and now I'm halfway through, and I'm annoyed because you put the wrong thing in my cart. So, and we can also see that in Google's data here. There's not a ton of traffic for this site because their core web vitals is largely empty, but their cumulative layout shift is not great. And I expect that's largely in part to this. A lot of times you'll see it pop up on the bottom or overlay on top. Anything that's keeping these elements in a consistent position is a better strategy. Again, not necessarily a speed issue, more of a UX thing, but since layout shift is incorporated in Core Web Vitals, those conversations often get conflated. But generally, I like the implementation here. One thing we noticed on load is that it's quite quick, even with the throttled connection. Here it appears as though we're getting a lot of pre-rendered content from the server. So the initial HTML has something instead of having to boot an application and go and get all that content and then hydrate a view. This is coming in with, a lot actually in the initial page view. We've got the product name, the product tile comes in eventually, and there's a placeholder for that. So they've done a really good job of reserving real estate for elements, which prevents excessive layout shift. This is the only exception there. I'm sure once I've accepted this or declined it for the first time and I return, now I've been cookied, I'll never see that again. Anyway, that's the only gripe I would have in terms of Web Vitals.
All right, so now here we have an example of a D2C site that has used this instead of what everyone hates, which is a rotating carousel. Instead, they've got this kind of explore our product line through hotspots and exposing a little short description. But this is very high above the fold. So your previous comments about you want it loaded after main content. What about this type of an implementation?
I second your philosophy around everyone hates carousels. And I think this is definitely an opportunity to do much more with less. And this to me isn't a third party. The content here isn't UGC. This is first party content. So you have a lot more control over what's loaded. And you could build this in-house. This doesn't necessarily need to be a third party plugin. This could be done with some CSS and JavaScript quite easily. So yeah, I quite like it. I think you're going to run into art direction challenges here. So as soon as this goes to a mobile width, this image isn't going to work anymore. You're going to want different image dimensions and potentially photos for different viewports. And then your hitboxes are going to move. But there are ways to do this very performant without a third-party plugin at all. And then there's ways to do this that are very heavy. So depending on how this loads when this first comes in, there's you could do a few different tricks here, like loading the image behind it and then overlaying just the transparent, we'll say interactable little plus bubbles. And that would be quick, or at least appear to be quick. The worst thing to do here would be don't show anything until a third-party widget has loaded and populated all of the above the fold content. And so we want to dig into it a little deeper if it were still up and running.
So something that definitely adds visual appeal to mobile menus and flyout navs is adding some kind of graphic thumbnail. But of course, we don't want to do anything that impacts performance. So what would you say are best practices when using this tactic?
Great, yeah. I think in general, these are presumed to be off canvas. And so I would say the best practice would be, well, these are really tiny. So first of all, image format, compression, the basics, make sure they're, these could be probably 10K each. They don't need to be much bigger than that. And then make sure they're not loading early in the life cycle. So You could probably lazy load these assets actually. Depending on how far they are in the scroll position, lazy loading may or may not trigger properly. So I would just say fetch priority low is it on the image tags. And yeah, loading equals lazy. It's not going to hurt. These are a couple of attributes on an image tag to tell the browser when I should get this. How important is this? And these are not, there's a whole page beneath this that we're not seeing right now, which was the primary experience that the user came to the page to see. Maybe it's the home page, maybe it's a product detail page. You want to prioritize all of that content before the off canvas, below the fold, or third-party content.
Would you say that loading like an illustration or an icon instead of an actual image would make a difference?
Adding pure vector graphics instead. So if you could do like an SVG instead of a raster image like these, could result in no additional requests. So I generally tend to recommend iconography, but not like a font icon, more like an SVG icon embedded directly in the DOM. Your CMS may or may not allow that kind of behavior. But if this is a custom build, then yeah, I mean, you're not going to get the same experience. So you're back to the conversation, the age-old debate between art direction, visuals, and performance. No images are going to perform faster than images would, but math and straight lines, and you can do curves obviously, and you can do illustration with SVG and vector graphics, but it's not going to be the picture of a barbecue.
Right. And then does file format make a huge difference? You want to have it in WebP?
Yep. Yeah, WebP is really well supported now across major browsers. So you don't want to be putting PNGs in here. That'll come back to file size. I really like Squoosh, SQUOOSH, I believe, is just like a drag and drop file size optimizer for this kind of use case. Drag up your original, squish it, download the old one, and put it in your CMS. Sorry, download the recompressed one.